Admiral Vrexthal stood before the Grand Council, his three hearts beating in different rhythms. The silence in the chamber was heavy, pressing down on him like the gravity of a dead star. 12 council members watched him with their black eyes, waiting for an explanation. Waiting to understand how he had lost everything. "Speak," the High Counselor commanded. Her voice echoed through the crystal walls. Vrexthal's throat felt dry. "Honored Council, I must tell you about the humans." The council chamber remained silent. They already knew he had failed. They knew that of the 1,200 warships he had commanded, only 17 had returned. The greatest military defeat in Kashari history. But they did not know why. They did not know how. "Begin at the beginning," the High Counselor said. Vrexthal closed his eyes and remembered. 3 months earlier, the survey ship Dawn of Knowledge had discovered a new system. It was unremarkable at first. A yellow star, several rocky planets, gas giants in the outer system, standard planetary formation. But the third planet from the sun showed signs of industrial civilization. The survey captain had sent the data immediately. A pre-FTL species. They had satellites in orbit. Radio transmissions filled the space around their world. Chemical rockets launched from the surface, primitive and slow. The species called themselves humans. They called their planet Earth. Vrexthal had studied the reports with growing satisfaction. Earth sat at the junction of 3 major transit lanes. Once the Kashari developed those lanes, trade would flow through this sector. Wealth beyond measure. But first the humans had to be removed or subjugated. The Kashari supremacy did not share space with primitives. He had assembled his fleet with care. 1,200 warships, each one a masterwork of Kashari engineering. Energy shields that could absorb megaton impacts. Particle beam weapons that could slice through asteroids. Quantum communication systems that allowed instant coordination across light years. Missile systems with hunter-seeker programming. Point defense grids that could track 1,000 targets simultaneously. Against this, the humans had 10 ships. Vrexthal had counted them himself when his fleet emerged at the edge of their solar system. 10 vessels, cobbled together from what looked like cargo haulers and mining equipment. Crude metal hulls with primitive fusion drives. No energy shielding. No particle beams. Chemical propellant weapons and fission warheads. Technology the Kashari had abandoned 2,000 years ago. The ratio was 120 to 1 in his favor. "It should have been simple," Vrexthal told the council. "We had every advantage. Technology, numbers, experience. Our species has fought and won 300 campaigns of expansion. We have defeated the Thorian Empire, the Quesh Confederation, the Mechanical Consensus. Compared to them, the humans were nothing." He had broadcast his demands on all human frequencies. Unconditional surrender, evacuation of their homeworld, relocation to a designated reservation system, standard terms for a conquered species, generous even. The Kashari would not exterminate them, only displace them. The human response had been unexpected. A single transmission, audio only. A female voice speaking in the trade language that the survey ship had taught them. "Admiral Vrexthal of the Kashari Supremacy. We received your terms, our answer is no." That was all. No negotiation, no counter-offer, just refusal. Vrexthal had been amused. Primitives often had inflated opinions of their capabilities. He had seen it before. They would learn. "I gave them 6 hours to reconsider," Vrexthal said to the council. "I wanted to be merciful, to give them time to see reason." The 6 hours had passed in silence. No further transmissions from Earth. No diplomatic overtures. Nothing. When the deadline expired, the human fleet began to move. 10 ships accelerating toward his 1,200. Vrexthal had almost pitied them. He imagined their final moments, their realization that they had chosen annihilation over sense. But orders were orders. He had a mission to complete. "All ships," he had commanded. "Weapons free. Destroy the human fleet." The battle began. Particle beams lanced through space, brilliant and deadly. The first human ship took 3 direct hits to its forward section. Metal vaporized. Atmosphere vented into space. The ship's fusion drive flickered and died. But the ship did not stop. It continued forward on momentum alone, now a dead hulk spinning slowly through the void. Vrextal frowned. He had expected the humans to break formation, to scatter, to run. That was what every other species did when they realized they were beaten. The humans did not scatter. The second ship exploded under sustained fire, breaking apart in a flash of nuclear fusion. Debris spread in an expanding sphere. The third ship lost its entire rear section, but kept firing its chemical weapons. Primitive. Missiles streaked toward the Kashari fleet, slow enough that point defense systems destroyed them easily. It was then that Vrextal noticed something strange. The human ships were not trying to evade. They were not using evasive maneuvers or attempting to minimize damage. They were flying straight at his fleet, absorbing fire, dying slowly but never deviating from their course. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "the humans are accelerating. They are moving faster than their drives should allow." Vrextal checked the readings. She was right. The human ships were burning their engines at levels that should have melted the machinery. They were pushing beyond safety limits, beyond sanity. The fourth human ship died, then the fifth. Half their fleet was gone in the first 15 minutes of battle. "They are buying time," Vrextal said suddenly. "They are sacrificing themselves to delay us." "For what purpose?" the tactical officer asked. That was when the sensors detected the launches from Earth, thousands of them. Small craft rising from the planet's surface like insects from a disturbed nest. They filled the detection screens, overwhelming the tracking systems. Ships that were too small to be military vessels, too varied to be a uniform fleet. "What are those?" someone asked. Vrextal magnified the images. His blood ran cold. They were civilian craft. Atmospheric shuttles modified for space. Mining pods with weapons welded to their hulls. Personal transports carrying missiles. Even what looked like luxury yachts armed with improvised cannons. Thousands of humans, flying ships that had no business in a military engagement, coming straight at his fleet. The sixth human military ship exploded, but now the swarm was entering weapons range. The first wave of civilian craft opened fire with everything they had. Most of their weapons were absurdly primitive. Some were literally firing solid projectiles, chemical explosives, ancient technology. But there were so many of them. "Point defense active," his tactical officer reported. "Engaging targets." The automated defense systems came online, tracking and destroying the incoming craft. They killed hundreds in seconds, but hundreds more kept coming. One small craft evaded the point defense grid and slammed into a Kashari destroyer. The impact barely scratched the shields, but the craft exploded on contact, a nuclear detonation at point-blank range. The destroyer's shields held. Barely. "Sir," the tactical officer said, and Vrextal heard fear in her voice for the first time. "They are using themselves as weapons." Vrextal watched the screens in growing horror. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to hurt him, to make him bleed, regardless of the cost to themselves. A message came through on the human frequencies. Not a formal transmission. Just a broadcast sent on all channels. Music, strange and haunting. And a human voice speaking in their own language, words the translation system struggled to interpret. "You wanted our surrender," the voice said. "We are giving you our answer." The remaining human military ships, battered and dying, accelerated to ramming speed. The seventh human military ship rammed into the Kashari battlecruiser Eternal Dawn, at 12% the speed of light. The battlecruiser's shields flared brilliant white as they absorbed the kinetic energy. The shields held, but the power drain was enormous. Systems across the ship flickered and died. The eighth ship followed 30 seconds later, targeting the same battlecruiser. This time the shields failed. The human ship tore through the hull like paper, and the Eternal Dawn broke apart in a cascade of secondary explosions. Vrextal felt his hands shaking. All ships, evasive patterns, do not let them close. But the swarm of civilian craft made evasive maneuvers nearly impossible. They were everywhere, like a cloud of stinging insects, too many to track individually. too small to be priority targets, but collectively they were grinding down his fleet's defenses. The Kashari weapons were designed for fleet battles. Large ships fighting at medium range with energy weapons. The point defense systems could handle missiles and fighters, but not thousands of suicidal pilots in ships that massed less than a fighter. A dozen civilian craft converged on a Kashari frigate. The first 3 died to point defense. The 4th got through and detonated against the shields. The 5th hit the same spot. By the 8th impact, the shields collapsed, and the remaining craft slammed into the hull. The frigate listed sideways, venting atmosphere and debris. They are targeting damaged vessels, the tactical officer reported. They identify weakness and concentrate fire. Vrexthal watched another frigate die. The humans were not fighting randomly. Despite the chaos, despite the seeming madness of their tactics, there was coordination. They were sharing targeting data, directing their attacks where they would do the most damage. The 9th human military ship exploded under sustained particle beam fire. Only one remained now, the largest of their fleet. It looked like a colony ship, massive and ungainly, covered in improvised armor plating and bristling with weapons that had been bolted to its hull. "Destroy it," Vrexthal ordered. "Concentrate all fire on that vessel." 50 ships turned their weapons on the human flagship. Particle beams converged from multiple angles. The human ship's hull began to glow red, then white. Sections melted and broke away, but it kept coming, engines burning at impossible intensity. Then it did something unexpected. It opened its cargo bay doors. Hundreds of small craft poured out. Not civilian ships this time. These were different. Sleek and fast, painted flat black, covered in strange angles and surfaces. They moved with precision, flying in tight formations. "What are those?" Vrexthal demanded. The sensor officer studied her screens. "Unknown design. They are not showing up on thermal scans. The hull coating is absorbing our targeting sensors." Stealth fighters. The humans had hidden their military fighters inside a civilian vessel. The black fighters scattered into the Kashari fleet like knives into flesh. They were fast, faster than anything the Kashari had seen. They carried missiles that ignored countermeasures and found gaps in the point defense. They targeted sensors arrays and weapon emplacements with surgical precision. "Sir, we are losing communications with the 3rd battle group," someone reported. "Their command ship is not responding." "Redirect," Vrexthal began, but another alarm cut him off. The human flagship was still coming, still burning, still dying, but still moving. It was heading straight for his command ship. "Evasive," Vrexthal shouted. "Full power to engines." His flagship, the Pride of Kashar, was one of the largest vessels ever built by his people. 3 kilometers long, armed with enough weapons to sterilize a continent. But it was also slow. Built for command and control, not for dogfighting. The human colony ship was faster, or rather, its crew did not care about survival. They were burning their engines so hot that the rear section was literally melting, but they were closing the distance. Vrexthal watched in horror as the human ship accelerated to ramming speed. At this mass, at this velocity, not even the Pride of Kashar's shields would hold. "All weapons, fire, destroy that ship." Every weapon on his flagship opened fire at once. The human colony ship vanished in a storm of energy. When the sensors cleared, there was only debris. Vrexthal exhaled in relief. Then the debris cloud exploded. Not one explosion. Hundreds. The humans had rigged their ship with nuclear weapons. With the ship already destroyed, the bombs detonated in a sphere of overlapping blasts. The Pride of Kashar's shields absorbed the energy, but barely. Power systems across the ship failed. The bridge lights went out, replaced by emergency red lighting. "Damage report," Vrexthal demanded. "Shields at 20%. Main weapons offline. We have hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Casualties reported across all sections." Vrexthal looked at the battle display. His fleet was scattered. Ships reported damage and casualties. 17 vessels had been destroyed. 30 more were damaged enough to be combat ineffective. And the swarm of human civilian craft was still attacking, still dying, still hurting them. "Sir," the communications officer said quietly, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth. Play it." A human face appeared on the screen. Male, middle-aged, wearing some kind of military uniform. He looked tired. Behind him, Vrexthal could see what looked like a command center. People working at stations, screens showing the battle. "Admiral Vrexthal," the human said. "My name is General Marcus Webb, United Earth Defense Force. I want you to understand something. What you see here is not our military. These are our civilians, our volunteers. People who had never fired a weapon until 3 weeks ago." Vrexthal said nothing. "Our actual military is still on Earth," Webb continued. "Waiting for you. We studied your tactics, your doctrine, your history. You always demand surrender before attack. You always give time to respond. You think it makes you civilized." The general leaned forward. "We use that time to evacuate non-combatants to underground shelters, to arm volunteers, to prepare. You gave us 6 hours. We needed 4. "You cannot win this battle," Vrexthal said. His voice sounded weak even to his own ears. "We are not trying to win," Webb replied. "We are trying to show you something. We are trying to show you what happens when you threaten human beings on their homeworld." The transmission cut off. Vrexthal looked at his tactical display. His fleet still outnumbered the humans. He still had over 1,000 ships, but they were disorganized, scattered, taking damage from an enemy that should not have been able to touch them. "Sir," the tactical officer said, "the human civilian craft are withdrawing. They are falling back toward Earth." "Finally," someone muttered. "They are running." But Vrexthal did not feel relief. Something was wrong. The humans had fought with insane ferocity for an hour, and now they were just leaving? It made no sense, unless they had accomplished their objective. "Sensors," Vrexthal said slowly. "Scan the area between us and Earth. Full spectrum. Look for anything unusual." The sensor officer worked her controls. Then she froze. "Sir, I am detecting thousands of objects between us and the planet. Small, inactive. They were hidden by the battle debris and electromagnetic interference." "What kind of objects?" "Unknown. They appear to be dormant. No power signatures. Just floating in space." Vrexthal felt cold understanding wash over him. "Mines. They seeded the space with mines while we were distracted." Before anyone could respond, proximity alarms screamed across the fleet. The dormant objects were activating. Thousands of them, scattered throughout the battle space. Simple chemical. Rockets pushing simple explosive charges toward the nearest Kashari ships. The mines were primitive, unsophisticated, easy to destroy if you saw them coming, but there were so many, and the Kashari fleet, bunched together after the chaotic battle, was in the worst possible position. Evasive action. All ships scatter. The first mine reached a destroyer. The explosion was tiny compared to the ship's mass, but it was enough to breach the weakened shields. The second mine hit moments later, then the third. Across the fleet, ships tried to maneuver, but they were too close together. Too many mines. Too much chaos. Vrexthal watched 17 more ships die in the next 10 minutes, not from sophisticated weapons or superior technology, from floating bombs that the humans had planted while his attention was elsewhere, from traps they had set before the battle even began. "Admiral," his second-in-command said quietly, "we need to withdraw. Regroup. We are losing cohesion." Vrexthal wanted to refuse, to press forward, to salvage something from this disaster. But his officer was right. If they stayed, they would bleed ships until none remained. "Signal the fleet," he said, the words tasting like ash. "All ships retreat to the nebula at coordinates 77 Alpha. We will regroup there and plan our next assault." The Kashari fleet turned away from Earth. The human civilian craft did not pursue. They simply watched the mighty Kashari supremacy run from a battle they should have won. Vrexthal sat in his command chair and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The nebula offered cover and time to think. Vrexthal's fleet had limped into the purple clouds of gas and dust, damaged and demoralized. Repair crews worked around the clock, but the damage was extensive. More than that, Something had broken in the fleet's spirit. Rexthal saw it in the faces of his crew. Fear, an emotion the Kashari had nearly forgotten. For 2,000 years, they had been the apex predators of known space. They had crushed every enemy, absorbed every rival. The universe bent to their will because they were superior in every way, but the humans had hurt them. Primitives with chemical rockets and improvised weapons had killed Kashari warriors, had destroyed Kashari ships, had driven them back. Status report, Rexthal demanded. His second-in-command, Officer Drethal, consulted her tablet. 34 ships destroyed. 62 damaged to varying degrees. 18 require shipyard repairs that we cannot perform here. Our combat effectiveness is reduced by 41%. 41%. From an enemy that should not have been able to damage a single vessel. And the humans? Rexthal asked. Unknown, sir. Long-range sensors cannot penetrate the planetary defenses they have erected, but estimates suggest they lost approximately 60% of the forces they committed to battle. 60% losses. The humans had traded their lives at a rate of 2-to-1, but with only 10 military ships against 1,200, they should have been annihilated in minutes with 0 Kashari casualties. Instead, they had extracted a terrible price. I want all intelligence data on humans, Rexthal said. Everything we collected. I want to know who we are fighting. The next 6 hours were illuminating and disturbing. The survey ship had collected extensive data on human civilization, history, culture, entertainment. It was standard procedure to understand a species before conquest. But the survey team had dismissed most of the information as irrelevant. Rexthal had approved their decision. Why waste time studying primitives? Now he wished he had read the reports more carefully. This is impossible, Drethal said, staring at her tablet. According to this data, humans have been in a state of continuous warfare for their entire recorded history. Over 10,000 years of conflicts. That cannot be accurate, Rexthal said. Species evolve past internal conflict before developing space travel. It is a universal law of civilization. Apparently not for humans, sir. They have fought wars continuously even while developing advanced technology. In their 20th century alone, they fought 2 global conflicts that killed over 80 million of their own people. Rexthal felt ill. 80 million? In internal conflicts? Yes, sir. And they have specific words in their languages for suicide attacks. Kamikaze, Shaheed, Martyr, Last Stand, Forlorn Hope. They have entire military philosophies built around sacrificing lives for strategic advantage. Rexthal thought about the colony ship that had destroyed itself to damage his flagship. The civilian pilots who had flown into his point defenses knowing they would die. It was not desperation. It was doctrine. There is more, sir, Drethal continued. Human history includes countless examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through unconventional tactics. The Battle of Thermopylae, Teutoburg Forest. The Tet Offensive. They study these battles. They teach them to their young. Losing battles that become symbolic victories. Symbolic victories? Rexthal did not understand the concept. Battles where military defeat leads to strategic or psychological success. Humans place enormous value on defiance, on resistance, even in hopeless situations. There are human sayings. Better to die on your feet than live on your knees. They mean it literally, sir. Rexthal accessed the historical files himself. He read about human wars. About the siege of Leningrad, where humans ate wallpaper paste rather than surrender. About Masada, where they chose suicide over capture. About the Alamo, where humans fought to the death knowing reinforcements would never come. The Kashari had nothing like this in their culture. When faced with superior force, the Kashari surrendered or retreated. It was logical. Survival allowed for future victory. Death accomplished nothing. But humans seemed to think death could accomplish quite a lot. Sir? The communications officer interrupted. We are receiving transmissions from the human planet. They are broadcasting on multiple frequencies. What kind of transmissions? Music, sir. And what appear to be historical recordings. Play them. The bridge speakers crackled to life. A human voice speaking in their language, rough and powerful. The translation system worked to interpret. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. The voice belonged to someone named Winston Churchill, a human leader during one of their global wars. Another recording played. Different voice. Different war. You may fly over our land. You are stronger than we are. I have no doubt about that. But at what price? What price are you willing to pay? The recordings continued. Dozens of them. Speeches from human leaders throughout their history, all delivering the same message: defiance, resistance, the promise that any victory would cost blood and treasure beyond calculation. They are trying to demoralize us, Drethal said. It is working, someone muttered. Vrexthal looked around the bridge. His crew was exhausted, frightened. They had lost friends and colleagues to an enemy they had dismissed as irrelevant. And now they were learning that this enemy had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. Sir, the sensor officer said urgently, I am detecting small craft approaching the nebula. Dozens of them. They are not broadcasting identification. Human ships? Likely, sir. They appear to be the same stealth fighters we encountered before. Brextal felt his heart's race. Battle stations. Prepare to engage, but the human ships did not attack. They flew through the nebula in a grid pattern, clearly visible on sensors. They were not hiding. They were showing themselves deliberately. They are scanning us, the sensor officer reported. Active sensor sweeps. They are cataloging our damage. Counting our ships, weapons lock, fire on those craft. Particle beams lanced through the nebula. But the human ships were fast and the nebula interfered with targeting. They dodged effortlessly, performing maneuvers that should have torn apart any vessel at those speeds. Their pilots were skilled. Impossibly skilled. Then the human ships did something strange. They turned away from the fleet and headed back toward Earth. But before they left, they broadcast a message. No words. Just images. Images of Earth. Of cities full of lights. Of orbital platforms under construction. Of factories producing weapons. Of training grounds filled with soldiers. Of more ships being built in dozens of orbital shipyards. The message was clear. Come if you dare. We are ready. We are waiting. We will make you pay for every kilometer. Analysis, Vrexthal demanded. How many ships can they produce? His intelligence officer looked pale. Based on the industrial capacity shown in those images, sir, they could build hundreds of ships per month. Thousands per year. Their construction methods are crude but fast. They are not building elegant vessels like ours. They are building weapons platforms, simple, effective, mass-produced. Vrexthal understood then what he was facing. The Kashari built ships that lasted centuries, masterworks of engineering that took years to construct. The humans were building disposable weapons, ships meant to kill and die and be replaced immediately. They are gearing their entire civilization for total war, Drethal said quietly. This is not a military. This is a species preparing for extinction-level conflict. Over the next days, the situation worsened. The humans hacked into Kashari communication networks. They infiltrated fleet channels and broadcast more propaganda, images of the battle. Recordings of Kashari ships dying, human pilots laughing as they flew into enemy fire, human soldiers singing marching songs about death and glory. The psychological warfare was devastating. Kashari crews were not trained for this. They were trained for clean, professional combat between civilized species. The humans fought like savages, like animals backed into a corner. But they were not mindless. Every action was calculated. Every broadcast designed to erode morale. Ship captains began reporting problems, crews refusing to participate in the next assault, soldiers requesting transfer, some asking to go home. The Kashari military had never experienced mass morale failure before. Vrexthal tried to maintain discipline. He issued orders. He gave speeches. He reminded them of their duty to the supremacy. But his own words sounded hollow even to himself, because he had read the human histories. He had seen what they did to invaders, to conquerors, to anyone who threatened their home. The Mongols who conquered Asia could not hold Russia. The armies that defeated Europe could not defeat Vietnam. The empires that spanned continents broke against small nations that refused to accept defeat. Humans lost battles. They lost wars. But they never stopped fighting, never surrendered, never accepted that the universe might have other plans for them. And now the Kashari supremacy, in all its power and glory, was learning what that meant. Admiral, Drethal said, the fleet commanders are requesting a command meeting. They want to discuss our next move. Vrexthal nodded. Assemble them. We will plan our assault on Earth. We still have over 1,100 ships. We can still win this. But even as he said it, he wondered if he believed it anymore. The command meeting took place in a virtual conference, fleet commanders appearing as holograms around Vrextal's war table. 43 captains and admirals, representing what remained of the once mighty invasion force. "We should retreat," Admiral Cothran said immediately. "Return to Kashari space. Report the situation to the Supremacy. Request reinforcements before attempting another assault. We outnumber them 10-1, Admiral Vextal countered. "We have sustained losses, yes, but we remain superior in every category except insanity. I propose we simply bombard their planet from orbit. Turn their cities to glass. Why expose ourselves to their suicide tactics when we can kill them from distance?" Vrextal had considered this option. The Kashari had never been squeamish about planetary bombardment. Entire species had been sterilized when they proved too difficult to subjugate. But something made him hesitate. "The humans have orbital defenses," he said. "Those platforms they were constructing. We do not know their capabilities." "Then we test them," Vextal replied. "Send in a battle group. Draw their fire. Assess their strength. Then we know what we face." It was sound logic. Conservative, professional, exactly what Kashari doctrine recommended. "Very well," Vrextal agreed. "Vextal, you will command the probe. Take 3 squadrons. Approach the planet at maximum weapons range. Engage their orbital platforms. Report their capabilities. Do not commit to full assault. Understood?" "Understood, Admiral." The meeting dissolved. Vrextal watched on tactical displays as Vextal organized his force. 90 ships, moving in tight formation toward Earth. It was more than enough firepower to destroy any orbital defenses a pre-FTL species could construct. The squadron left the safety of the nebula. Vrextal tracked their progress, watching sensor readings carefully. The humans would have detected them by now, would be preparing their response. "Sir," his sensor officer said, "the human planet is launching ships. Multiple contacts rising from the surface. How many? Difficult to determine. The atmospheric interference. Wait. I count over 500 individual signatures. 500 ships. The humans had built 500 ships in the time since the first battle." Vrextal felt a chill. Their industrial capacity was terrifying. Vextal's squadron opened fire at maximum range. Particle beams and missiles streaked toward the orbital platforms. The humans did not return fire immediately. They simply absorbed the attack, their shields flaring. "Their shields are holding," Vextal reported. "Stronger than expected." Adjusting fire pattern. The Kashari ships concentrated their fire on a single platform. Under sustained bombardment, the shields began to fail. The platform broke apart, tumbling out of orbit in pieces. "First platform destroyed," Vextal reported. "These defenses are formidable but not impregnable. We can break them with sufficient force." Then the human ships reached the battle zone. They did not charge like suicide craft. They moved with precision in organized squadrons. These were professional military vessels, not civilian volunteers. And they had learned from the first battle. The human ships carried weapons the Kashari had not seen before. Railguns that fired solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. Missiles with electronic countermeasures that confused point defense. Directed energy weapons that, while weaker than Kashari particle beams, were numerous and coordinated. Vextal's squadron found itself under concentrated fire. One Kashari destroyer took 3 railgun impacts in quick succession. The solid projectiles, each massing several tons, punched through the shields and continued through the hull. The destroyer exploded. "Shields are less effective against kinetic weapons," Vextal reported, his voice tight. Adjusting defensive posture. Engaging targets, the battle became vicious. The humans were no longer sacrificing themselves. They used cover, orbital mechanics, and coordinated fire. They targeted damaged ships. They exploited weaknesses. They fought smart. Vrextal watched 8 more ships die. Then 12, 20. Vextal's probe was being savaged. "Vextal, withdraw," Vrextal ordered. "Fall back to the nebula." Acknowledged. "All ships break contact." "Return to..." Vextal's transmission cut off. His ship's icon on the tactical display flickered and died. Vrextal felt his heart sink. "Vextal? Respond." Silence. The surviving ships of the probe fled back toward the nebula, human ships pursuing. The humans broke off before entering the nebula, content to have driven away the attack. Of the 90 ships Vrextal had commanded, 37 returned. "This is impossible," Drethal said. "They are learning too fast, adapting too quickly." They should not be able to. They are humans, Vrexthal interrupted. We know what they are now. A species that has spent 10,000 years learning how to kill. This is what they do. He made his decision then. All ships prepare for full assault. We advance together. No more probes, no more testing. We will bring our full strength against them and crush them, whatever it costs. The fleet began preparations. Damaged ships were repaired as much as possible. Weapon systems were checked and rechecked. Crews were briefed. The entire fleet would advance on Earth together, over 1,000 ships moving as one. They would break the human defenses through sheer weight of numbers. Some ships would be lost, perhaps many ships, but Earth would fall. The fleet left the nebula in a massive formation. Vrexthal felt some of his confidence return. This was how the Kashari fought. Overwhelming force applied without hesitation. The humans were clever, but cleverness had limits. They were halfway to Earth when the nebula exploded behind them, not a natural explosion. Thousands of detonations scattered throughout the purple clouds. The nebula lit up like a second sun as nuclear weapons detonated in a chain reaction. What? Vrexthal began, but understanding hit him like a physical blow. The humans had mined the nebula. While his fleet rested and repaired, human ships had seeded the entire cloud with nuclear weapons, dormant, waiting. And now they had been triggered remotely. Ships at the rear of his formation were caught in the blast wave. The expanding sphere of superheated gas and radiation tore through shields and hulls. 30 ships died in seconds, 50, 70, evasive, Vrexthal shouted. All ships, emergency acceleration! The fleet scattered, trying to escape the expanding destruction. But the nebula was huge, and they were deep inside it. The weapons had been placed strategically, creating overlapping kill zones. They knew we would hide in the nebula, Drethal said in horror. They knew our doctrine. They prepared for it. Vrexthal realized she was right. The humans had been studying them, learning their tactics, predicting their moves. The nebula had not been a safe harbor. It had been a trap. And he had led his fleet into it, sir, the sensor officer screamed. Multiple contacts. Incoming at high speed. The sensor display filled with new signatures. Human ships, dozens of them appearing from different vectors. They had been waiting, hidden, while the Kashari fleet positioned itself perfectly for ambush, and now they attacked. The human ships were not the suicide craft from the first battle. These were hunter-killers armed and fast. They targeted the Kashari ships that were damaged, disoriented, scattered by the nebula explosion. It was a slaughter. Vrexthal's flagship shuddered as a railgun impact tore through the forward shields. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Another impact. Then another. The Pride of Kashar, the mighty command ship, was being torn apart. Return fire, Vrexthal ordered. All weapons. But the targeting systems were damaged. Half the weapons were offline. The crew struggled to defend against enemies that came from every direction at once. A human missile penetrated the point defenses and exploded against the hull. The bridge lights failed. Emergency power kicked in dim and flickering. Hull breach on deck 4, someone reported. Casualties across all sections. Sir, we have lost main power. Switching to backups. Shield generators are failing. Vrexthal looked at the tactical display through the smoke and chaos. His fleet was dying, not fighting and retreating, not suffering calculated losses. Dying. Wholesale destruction of a force that should have been unstoppable. A human face appeared on his screen. The same general from before. Marcus Webb. The human looked tired but satisfied. Admiral Vrexthal, Webb said. You asked for terms. Now I will give you mine. Surrender immediately. Power down your weapons. You have 5 minutes. You cannot defeat us all, Vrexthal said, but his voice lacked conviction. I do not need to defeat you all, Webb replied. I just need to make victory cost more than you are willing to pay. Your fleet is scattered. Your ships are damaged. You are disoriented and low on ammunition, and I have 30,000 more missiles waiting to launch from Earth. So I ask you, Admiral, how many ships are you willing to lose? Half, 3/4? All of them? Vrexthal looked at his tactical display. Webb was not bluffing. The human orbital platforms were active, weapons hot, tracking every Kashari ship. And behind the human fleet he could see the planet itself, a world preparing for total war, a species that would never stop fighting. We had everything, Vrexthal said quietly. Superior numbers, Superior technology. Superior experience. How did we lose? Webb's expression softened slightly. Because you thought this was just a battle. For us, this is existence. You can retreat to your empire and never think about us again. We cannot retreat from our home. We fight here or we... The human boarding parties arrived within the hour. They came in small shuttles, armed but not aggressive. Professional soldiers moving with discipline and purpose. Vrexthal watched them secure the pride of Kashar section by section, taking control of weapons and engineering. The humans did not execute prisoners. They did not torture or humiliate. They simply processed the Kashari crew efficiently, separating officers from enlisted, cataloging injuries, providing medical care where needed. It was all very civilized, which somehow made it worse. A human officer approached Vrexthal on the bridge. Female, gray hair, perhaps 50 years old by human aging standards. She wore insignia that marked her as high-ranking. She saluted briefly, a human gesture of military respect. Admiral Vrexthal, I am Admiral Sarah Chen, United Earth Defense Force. You and your senior staff will be transferred to a secure facility. Your crew will be held in orbit pending diplomatic resolution. You take prisoners, Vrexthal said. It was not a question. We follow the laws of war, Chen replied. Even when our enemies do not know those laws exist. She gestured for him to follow. Vrexthal walked through his ship, seeing the damage, the bodies being respectfully covered. The human soldiers treating Kashari wounded. It was strange. Alien. These were the savages who had destroyed his fleet with suicide tactics and nuclear traps, but they showed mercy to defeated enemies. Humans were contradictions. The shuttle ride to Earth was silent. Vrexthal looked out the window at the planet below. From orbit, it looked beautiful. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. A living world full of life and possibility. A world the Kashari had tried to take. The shuttle landed at a military facility. Vrexthal was led through corridors lined with human soldiers. They watched him with hard eyes, but no one struck him or spat at him. Professional, disciplined. General Marcus Webb was waiting in a conference room. He stood when Vrexthal entered, another gesture of respect. Admiral Chen remained at the door. Please sit, Webb said, gesturing to a chair. Vrexthal sat. Webb sat across from him. Between them was a table with a datapad displaying numbers and reports. Your fleet lost 972 ships, Webb said without preamble. 214,000 Kashari personnel died. This includes Admiral Vrexthal and 37 other fleet commanders. The survivors number approximately 400,000. They are being held in orbital stations under humane conditions. Vrexthal said nothing. The numbers were devastating. We lost 6,412 ships, Webb continued. Most were civilian craft that were converted to military use. 41,000 humans died. Another 90,000 were injured. You lost more ships, Vrexthal said. But we kept our world, Webb replied. And you lost 93% of your fleet. So who really won, Admiral? Vrexthal had no answer. Webb leaned back in his chair. I want you to understand something. We did not want this war. We would have negotiated. We would have shared this system, this planet, this space. We would have talked and compromised and found a solution that worked for everyone. You refused our terms, Vrexthal said. Your terms were slavery, Webb replied, his voice hardening. Relocation. Subjugation. You demanded we abandon our home and trust you to treat us fairly after we had surrendered everything. Would the Kashari accept such terms? The Kashari have never been conquered. Neither have humans. Not permanently. Not when we fight together. Webb pulled up images on the datapad. Historical records. Every species you conquered before us, they were peaceful. They were unified. They had outgrown violence before developing space travel, just like you assumed we had. So when you came with overwhelming force, they surrendered, because they calculated that survival was better than destruction. He looked at Vrexthal directly. But humans are different. We are still violent, still fractured. We fight each other constantly over resources, beliefs, territory, pride. We have never been fully unified. We probably never will be. But when an outside threat comes, when someone tries to take our home, something changes. What changes? Vrexthal asked. We remember that we are human first, that our disagreements are family arguments, and family protects family, even if we were fighting each other yesterday. Webb showed more images. Manufacturing facilities running 24 hours a day. Civilians volunteering for military service. Children assembling ammunition. Scientists sharing research across borders. Religious leaders blessing weapons. Artists creating propaganda. Criminals released from prison to fight. You gave us 6 hours to respond to your ultimatum, Webb said. We used 3 hours to evacuate non-combatants. 2 hours to arm every adult who could hold a weapon. 1 hour to coordinate with our military and position our traps. You thought the delay showed weakness. It showed efficiency. Rexthal thought about the nebula, the mines scattered through the battle space, the stealth fighters hidden in civilian ships. Everything had been planned, prepared, executed with precision. We studied your tactics, Webb continued. Your ships, your history. You Kashari follow doctrine perfectly. You do what your training tells you to do. That makes you predictable. We knew you would demand surrender. We knew you would attack when we refused. We knew you would fall back to the nebula, because that is what your military manuals say to do when facing unexpected resistance. You used our strengths against us. Frexthal said, we used your assumptions against you. You assumed we were primitive, desperate, disorganized. You assumed we would fight like every other species you conquered. You assumed technology would defeat determination. Webb stood and walked to the window. Outside, Vrextal could see human cities in the distance, intact, undamaged, alive. We are not special, Admiral, Webb said quietly. We are not superior. We are just survivors. We have been killing each other for 10,000 years, and we learned every possible way to win and lose. We learn to be clever when we are outnumbered. We learn to be vicious when we are cornered. We learn to use everything we have, sacrifice anything we must to protect what we love. He turned back to Vrextal. You came here with 1,200 ships and thought it would be easy. Now you are going to return to your empire with barely enough ships to carry your survivors. And you are going to tell them what happened here. What do you want me to tell them? Vrextal asked. The truth. That humans can be beaten in battle. That we are not invincible. But that victory against us costs blood and treasure that no one wants to spend. That we will use every trick, every weapon, every life to defend ourselves. That we fight dirty. That we do not care about honor when our children are threatened. Webb leaned forward, his eyes hard. And tell them this, Admiral. Tell them that we are expanding into space now. Building ships. Claiming systems. We will meet other species and we will try diplomacy first. We will offer friendship and cooperation. But if they respond with threats and ultimatums, if they think we are easy targets, they will learn the same lesson you learned. And what lesson is that? Frextal asked, though he already knew. That humans do not surrender. Ever. Not our homes. Not our freedom. Not our right to exist. We will burn our own worlds before we let someone else take them. We will sacrifice everything before we bow. And we will make victory so expensive that our enemies will wish they had never heard of Earth. Silence filled the room. Vrextal understood now. The humans were releasing him deliberately. They wanted him to take this message back to the Kashari supremacy. They wanted the galaxy to know what they were capable of. You could have killed us all, Vrextal said. Why show mercy? Because we are not monsters, Webb replied. We fight when we must. We kill when we must. But we do not enjoy it. We do not want to be conquerors. We just want to be left alone to live our lives. You tried to take that from us. We defended ourselves. Now it is over. Webb gestured to Admiral Chen. You will be given a ship. Enough food and fuel to reach Kashari space. Your injured will receive medical care. Your dead will be returned with honor. Go home, Admiral. Tell them what you learned. 3 days later, Vrextal stood on the bridge of a human transport ship that had been given to the surviving Kashari. It was crude compared to his flagship, but functional. The humans had kept their word, supplies, medical care, respectful treatment. He watched Earth shrink in the viewscreen as they departed. Around them flew the human defense fleet. Hundreds of ships now, with more being built every day. The humans were not wasting time. They were preparing for the next threat. Admiral, Drethel said quietly, what will you tell the Council? Vrextal thought about the question. He thought about his 1,200 ships, his dead crews, the assumption that primitives could not fight back, the arrogance that had led to disaster. I will tell them the truth, he said finally, that we outnumbered them 120 to 1, that we had superior technology and experience, that we should have won easily, he paused. And I will tell them that we lost everything because we forgot the most important rule of warfare. Never underestimate an enemy defending their home. 2 months later, Vrextal stood before the Grand Council again, this time telling them the full story. The council listened in silence. their expressions unreadable. When he finished, the High Counselor spoke. The Supremacy cannot allow this defeat to stand. They will